Kojima is a legendary game developer and one of the last true auteurs we're ever likely to see in the gaming sphere. His first game, Metal Gear, is a masterpiece of 80s game design and proved, to me at least, Kojima has understood the fundamentals of good game design since the beginning. But Kojima is but one man, and what's more, at the time of Metal Gear and for most of his career, he would be one man in a monetary marriage with his corporate overlord, Konami. The biggest reason for divorce is financial disagreements, which is exactly what would happen between Kojima and Konami with the development of Metal Gear Solid 5. But their issues started way before that, all the way back in 1987. You're watching Rail Deal Games, and in this Rail Deal review, I'll be looking at Metal Gear 2 Solid Snake and the way that Kojima's third game foreshadowed his and Konami's inevitable divorce. I can't get to the essence of what makes Metal Gear 2 Solid Snake Kojima's version without spoiling key gameplay elements, puzzle solutions, and story beats. This is your massive spoiler warning for everything Metal Gear 2. Click away now if you don't want spoilers for this 90s video game. With all of that established, let's dive right in. From the onset, the gameplay in Metal Gear 2 has been innovated upon since the first game. While the general loop of this game is quite similar to the first, there's an added element to the gameplay through 3 new mechanics. 1. Guards now have a vision cone, meaning the same evasive tricks from the first game no longer work. 2. Snake has to turn around before moving backwards, restricting the player's maneuverability options. And 3. Snake's new ability to crawl. These 3 mechanics fundamentally change the action espionage loop of this game. The guards and security cameras having vision cones makes being caught much easier, meaning there's an added focus on evasive measures in this game. This is where the turning mechanic is important. It takes a frame or so for Snake to turn, and that small delay can create issues for Snake if he's trying to make a last-minute dodge out of a guard's vision cone. If caught, Snake can resort to the same measures as the first game, either killing enough guards or evading long enough for the alarm to be shut off. However, this time around, the guards' cones in conjunction with the corridored level design of the game creates situations where the player will be caught too quickly for them to escape, regardless of the fact they entered a new room. This is why crawling is important in this game, because it allows the player to crawl into crevices or under tanks to hide for the duration of the alarm. With these gameplay systems, the player is tasked with exploring Zanzibar land, solving puzzles, and killing bosses, which are incredibly improved in this game over the first. The bosses in Metal Gear were kind of lame. Each was essentially easily counterable with whichever new item or weapon the player found, taking out any sense of discovery during the boss fights themselves. Metal Gear 2's biggest improvement over the original are these boss fights, which are far more interesting in this game. Let's take a look at each of the bosses in order of appearance to figure out what makes them so great. Black Ninja is the first boss of the game, and it was the introduction of this boss where I learned immediately how creative the bosses in this game were going to be. Black Ninja's major mechanic is the way he disappears and reappears. When he is translucent, he is invincible, meaning it is the player's responsibility to move ahead to where he is going to appear rather than where he is presently. While it is as simple as shooting his appearance sprite, the boss is far more interesting than all of the bosses in Metal Gear put together. After an awful swamp puzzle, which we'll be talking about more in depth later, Running Man is the second boss. He is likely my second favorite boss of the game because he's got it all. He promotes creativity under pressure by forcing the player to kill him in any way possible before the gas in the room kills them. Mechanically, the boss fight is simple. Using either C4 or mines, the player sets traps for Running Man by border collieing him into their landlocked explosives. Mines are far more efficient and don't require micromanaging, however they do require the player watch their own step, since it is quite possible to accidentally die to their own mines. This actually happened to me once during this fight, and it is an important lesson to learn since there is a later boss fight in the game mines are super useful against. The Hind D is far improved over the first game too. In Metal Gear, destroying the Hind D is as simple as sitting in a corner with the grenade launcher and pressing square until it's dead. In Metal Gear 2, the Hind D isn't incredibly more complex, but it is more interesting. Using the Stinger missiles, the player just targets the Hind D as it flies around the 4 squares, easily hitting it 2 to 3 times per cycle. The Stinger missile is a little clunky as the player needs to unequip equip the weapon in order to move and hide from the Hind-D. Destroying the Hind-D opens up the next area of the game. The first boss in the new area are the 4 horsemen, who are dispatched easily with the submachine gun and mines. Mines are literally so good at killing enemies in this game. The horsemen might have been more difficult if they had all attacked at once, but since they only jumped down 1 or 2 at a time, I was able to just put a mine in each of their areas, and as soon as they hit it, they would jump out of the arena once again, essentially meaning they were never all too threatening. The RC missiles make such quick work of Jungle Evil that I really don't have anything to say about this guy. He's the boss from this game that is designed most like the original suite from Metal Gear. My favorite boss immediately follows him up though. A worm had ransacked my inventory, eating all of my rations before this fight, adding a little bit of challenge to the fight since I wasn't able to heal and I was at low health. Night Fright is invisible, and the only clue the player gets as to his location is the sound his footsteps make when he starts shooting. I beat this guy by employing tactics I used against Running Man. Starting out, I set down a bunch of mines all over the bottom left corner, making sure 2 mines cover the passageways to the right of the arena. From here, I was able to peek out when Night Fright attacked to shoot him with the submachine gun, killing him quickly. There's many ways of dealing with this boss though, which is why he is my favorite. Metal Gear D, the reason for infiltrating Zanzibar land, is a chump, although he does put up a better fight than the original Metal Gear. Quick grenade throws to both legs make quick work of him, and with rations in the secondary slot, it's not able to really deal enough damage to kill the player. Gray Fox follows up Metal Gear D, and he's the second easiest boss of the game. I just followed him from the side, punching him over and over again. Something I did like about this fight is how it reminded me of the Legacy of Goku on Game Boy Advance. The gameplay is fairly similar, honestly, to many boss fights of that game. And finally, the last boss in Metal Gear 2 Solid Snake is once again Big Boss. This time around, Snake doesn't have a rocket launcher to make quick work of him, and instead the player has to walk into each room to get a lighter and aerosol can to immolate him. I died a fair few times here to the yellow pools, his houndish behavior, and lack of resources, especially considering the player has to use one of their 3 rations to be able to access the room with the aerosol can. Also, I have to mention the fact that the chocolate ration is necessary to cross the yellow pools, which is a stupid mechanic. I once died walking into a room because there's a yellow puddle right in front of the door, and I had to redo the entire encounter as a result. I appreciate what Kojima was doing here by remixing what a boss encounter in a video game could look like, but I was not a major fan of Big Boss's boss design. In the end, I used the crawl space in the top left corner as a buffer between him and me, using the jury-rigged flamethrower to hit him over the crawl space. I could hit him, but he couldn't hit me. Casting him to the flames, Big Boss, who is actually Venom Snake, dies, and Metal Gear 2 Solid Snake ends with Snake getting with the journalist girl and leaving Zanzibar in this cool escape sequence. Once in the chopper, the credits roll, leaving the player to reflect on the journey to this point, especially the exploration. The reason Metal Gear became one of my favorite 80s games upon completing it is down to its excellent exploration. So going into Metal Gear 2, I looked forward to the exploration loop. However, this game has some failings with its exploratory elements and puzzle solutions. Starting out, Zanzibar Land's first fortress is designed around the displaced nature of their elevators. One elevator traverses floors 1 through 4, and the other goes from basement 2, basement 1, and floor 2. At first, this was a little confusing for me, but as soon as I discovered the commonality between the elevators at floor 2, traversing the first base became cake. The second base also has the same sort of idea with the elevators, except navigating that base is extremely easy since each elevator is essentially connected to one other floor. The one that goes to the basement level connects the 2 bases together via a jet stream, making looping between them easy, albeit a bit annoying at times. What's most annoying about exploration in Metal Gear 2 are the incessant loading screens. Entering any room creates the Foxhound loading screen, and I got very familiar with this foxy boy by the time I finished this game. In this way, the bosses' designs are a little worse than Metal Gear's, but I also wouldn't call them bad. They're better designed than most games from the time period of its release, and even from today's games. Looping through the bases to discover keycards and items is mostly enjoyable and shows Kojima's real game design genius. Something I do like about this game over the original in this regard is the way that there are colored cards that essentially combine 3 other cards, reducing reducing the clutter of Snake's inventory this time around. However, the puzzles are not the best in this game. For reference, I played the original Metal Gear guideless and was able to beat the whole game without looking anything up, because the game's designed in such a way as to not punish the player too harshly. Metal Gear 2 mostly follows the original in this regard, except for a few key elements. As I mentioned before, the chocolate rations being necessary to traverse the yellow death pools is a stupid mechanic. I talked to every person in Zanzibar land, and nobody warned me about this, and my codec pals weren't helpful either. Two other sections of the game were equally awful, one being so bad I committed the cardinal sin of looking up a guide for the solution. Firstly, the swamp puzzle is a matter of trial and error. Given the clue that trucks drive through the swamp, the player has to navigate these winding paths through the swamp to get to the Running Man's boss room. Stepping off the path makes Snake sink into the swampy slush, and after enough time passes, Snake will just die. While I didn't die more than once or twice navigating this area, it's just a super annoying place to go through, especially since I killed myself with my own mind the first time I fought the Running Man, forcing me to redo this section again. I've watched my brother and dad play through Metal Gear Solid before. In that game, there's a bathroom puzzle where Snake has to locate Meryl by watching her go into the women's restroom. When I heard the rumors about a women's restroom in Base 1, I knew this puzzle was coming back to the forefront. I figured I would need to wait for the right guard to enter the women's restroom in order to progress, so I waited for 40 minutes before giving up, accepting maybe it wasn't the time for this puzzle. But I actually was in the right place, but to trigger Gustava's AI, the player has to call Colonel, Dr. Madner, Dr. Marv, and then Dr. Madner again. I looked up the solution because I couldn't get why she wasn't doing what she's supposed to do. Even knowing the solution, I had to wait around 20 minutes or so before Gustava decided to progress the plot. I see why Kojima redid this puzzle in Metal Gear Solid because of how flawed it is in this game. While Metal Gear 2 Solid Snake has a few rough edges with its exploration and puzzle design, I don't really blame Kojima. I get the sense he rushed through elements of Metal Gear 2 because it wasn't something he initially even wanted to make. It was only made in the first place because of creative differences between him and Konami after all. In 2015, we would all witness a massive nasty breakup between Kojima and Konami. Kojima would be barred from attending the Game Awards, and all of this would stem from Metal Gear Solid 5, The Phantom Pain's development running too long.
Thank you very much, Kiefer, for accepting that award. And as you noticed, Hideo Kojima is not here with us tonight, and I want to tell you a little bit about that. Mr. Kojima had every intention of being with us tonight, but unfortunately he was informed by a lawyer representing Konami just recently that he would not be allowed to travel to tonight's awards ceremony to accept any awards. He's still under an employment contract, and it's disappointing, and it's inconceivable to me that an artist like Hideo would not be allowed to come here and celebrate with his peers and his fellow teammates such an incredible game as Metal Gear Solid 5. But that's the situation we're in. Hideo is in Tokyo right now watching the show, so we want you to know, Hideo, that we're thinking of you. And we miss you. We hope to see you at the Game Awards 2016.
Konami and Kojima had major disagreements in the past, of course, but MGS5 was the inciting event for their divorce. In the end, MGS5 would be released with an unfinished later section of the game. Konami would release a much maligned Metal Gear Survive in 2018, and Kojima would form Kojima Productions, releasing Death Stranding in 2019. But frictions produced by a conflict of opinions regarding the MGS franchise started all the way back in 1987 with Metal Gear. Kojima is an auteur, meaning he likes to have a hand in every phase of his game's production, and that's part of the reason his games always have this definite identity. You can tell when a game had Kojima's hand in the mix, and that's the core reason so many people are fond of him. This aspect of his behavior was present at the start of his career too, as evidenced by his displeasure at learning how Konami had made an NES port of Metal Gear without his input. It's no surprise then that the NES port of Metal Gear is considered to be quite lacking in gameplay design, being often described as a miserable experience by those who have played it. But since Metal Gear sold pretty well, with approximately 1 million copies in the United States alone, a sequel was bound to happen. Considering the quality differentials between the two versions of Metal Gear, clearly Konami commanded Kojima make a sequel for the MSX and NES, right? Well, the answer to that question is no. Kojima didn't even know Snake's Revenge, the Konami-made sequel to Metal Gear for the NES, was being made until it was finished, and he was pissed. So much so he demanded to be able to make his own sequel. Konami, like most companies, weren't going to turn down a winning bet, so they allowed him to do so. And in 1990, the world would get Metal Gear 2 Solid Snake. Just like with Metal Gear, Kojima's version of Metal Gear 2 was far, far better than what Konami was able to put together. This interaction between them demonstrates the conflicting relationship between Kojima and Konami. Over time, Kojima would become Konami's golden boy. But, like with all emotionally and financially abusive relationships, this was not meant to last. No one likes to see their creations become bastardized, corrupted, and abused. And to Kojima, the MGS franchise would be like his kid. He stewarded it through its entire chronology, bringing his brand of ingenious game design into every aspect of each game. A future where Kojima doesn't work on MGS is not something I'm looking forward to, especially in a gaming industry that makes auteur designers an impossibility. Playing through this series for myself for the first time has been fascinating, as I've been able to see Kojima's philosophy for game design flourish so much in his second sojourn. Kojima's third video game is great, simply great, and I can't conclude this review without highly recommending it to those of you out there looking for more 90s era video games to play. It's crazy seeing the ways in which Kojima nearly single-handedly crafted the stealth genre from its inception, and I find myself looking forward towards playing this game every day at work, which is always the sign of a wonderful video game. There are a few elements about the game's design that could be called rough around the edges, but they are hardly deal breakers justifying passing up on this game for any of you historical gamers out there. As we all gear up for the release of Death Stranding 2 next year, I plan to play as many of Kojima's games as I can. But for those of you familiar with my review's structure, there's only one question left to answer. Will Metal Gear 2 make my top 100 games of the 90s list? Metal Gear 2 Solid Snake, while being a solid game, will not make my top 100 of the 90s. There are a few design decisions that make it something that doesn't hold up to the bottom games on that list, such as the swamp section and the bathroom puzzle. I also like the original Metal Gear better than its sequel, which puts Metal Gear 2 in this weird place of being simultaneously a great video game and a disappointing sequel. It's not disappointing in the sense I didn't like it though, and I need to stress that. I really do like this game, and I mean everything I said about it in this video. There's even some genius to the game design too that I know for a fact will be expanded upon in Metal Gear Solid. If you want to see my review on that game in the future, make sure to subscribe and ring the notification bell. It'll be coming sometime in the coming months. And that's the video, my guys. Let me know in the comment section below what you think of Metal Gear 2 Solid Snake and my review of it. And while you're there, please smash that like button and share this review with your friends. If you have a moment right now, consider checking out one of my videos on the screen. Regardless of what you choose to do, have an awesome day, gamers.